that part of a response that's being drafted by the city? That's the first time you've heard this? Because he did state that 71 is the highest place where he saw these errors.
Yes, that's right. And, we had less than 24 hours to file a response. We first saw this report at about 10:15 this morning. We first saw several of the pages that related to the Columbus City schools at about, well, it was in the evening on Tuesday. Can't tell you exactly what time. And so we really had very little time to make a response. And I understand that the auditor has what he believes are compelling reasons to move forward quickly. I would simply say to you that I think you should never sacrifice fairness for speed. And we did not have, there has been no dialogue between the auditor's office and, to my knowledge, any of the representatives of school districts, certainly not this one, on this issue. There's been no exchange of views on this. I think we were all, frankly, I don't think startled is too strong a word, to hear this interpretation of the EMA's rules.
Bill. The auditor also said today that Ohio Revised Code does not allow a student to be withdrawn without the district maintaining in its records the supporting documentation that supports that the student really was withdrawn for those reasons. He was particularly referring to Cleveland not keeping any records, but also there were examples in other districts too where the records they couldn't find. I'm just looking here at some of the findings in Columbus where the first finding is that records could not be located, files could not be located.
Sure. Yeah.
He's saying that in itself is
Yep.
illegal, that you're withdrawing a student and you can't find the record.
Yeah. Well,
My question being, you keep asking for recommendations, but he's saying the revised code gives you that recommendation. You got to keep this record as the law.
right. Well, your question really calls for several responses, and let me see if I can address them. He went on at some length, if you'll recall, talking about due process. And I think he used the phrase, no student should have their school taken from them without due process. Well, truancy is not a process of taking from a student his or her school. And the fact that you're found truant doesn't mean that you don't get to go to school. In fact, the whole end game of truancy proceedings is to get a student into school. So a finding of truancy doesn't ban a student from school. It really is intended to do the opposite. So I'm not, frankly, it's not clear to me what point the auditor was making when he talked about due process and talked about students having their schools taken from them. That didn't happen here. Students could, what happened in many instances, and this is public knowledge. What I'm telling you is not something that is a result of any privileged conversation that I've had. It's in data that has been released publicly. What happened here in most of these instances is that a student was withdrawn and then re-enrolled in the same school. And what was happening is they were withdrawn when a string of absences began and re-enrolled when that string of absences ended. And so the fact that due process applies to truancy has really, in all due respect to the auditor, nothing to do with the appropriateness of withdrawing a student who simply is repeatedly absent from school. I don't think there's any connection at all, is a short answer.
I can just follow up one thing. It looks like of the 10 Columbus schools that he cited, only 2 of them used that code 71 as the reason that he cited. The rest of them, the 8 of them, have nothing to do with truancy. But it seems to be your focus today to talk about his interpretation of truancy, but 80% of the cases, 80% of the buildings, the reason had nothing to do with truancy.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. First, I'm going to finish the answer to the question you asked me a minute ago, which was, what about these records and are we required to keep them? We don't know about the records because we don't know who these students are, and we haven't had a chance to look at the records themselves. That's what Dr. Harris was speaking to. And so we very much, and I certainly hope that the auditor will share with us the student names so that we can go and look at these records ourselves. If there are record-keeping deficiencies, I am certain that the Board of Education and the superintendent want to do everything they can to keep that from happening in the future. I mean, it's a challenge to keep records on 1,000 students 5 days a week who are coming and going and doing all sorts of things. Dr. Harris's point about the 50 schools can't be overemphasized. To elaborate on it just a little, the auditor wanted to look at students from 10 schools, but in order to track their records, he had to go to 50. It really does tell you how mobile students in an urban school district can be. They move from school to school to school. So it's a huge challenge, and tracking those records in a district that's trying to watch its budget and has limited resources. We've all had children in Little League teams. Just trying to keep track of them in a game can be difficult. Imagine doing it for 1,000 young people in a school. It is a huge, huge challenge. So if the records are inadequate, I am confident that the district wants to correct that. In terms of the specific codes, as I said, we really can't respond to it because we just don't know. We haven't seen them. There is always the risk that some of this is all data entry, and there's certainly the risk that things got miscoded. I mean, that frankly is one of the reasons that you go back and look at data. It's why you scrub data, and using that term the way the auditor used it when he was the auditor in Delaware County, which is to make your data better and not to manipulate it.
Jennifer.